All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So I'm gonna roughly guide you through a introduction before we move into the hands-on part, just to give you a brief overview, of course, over Wonderland Engine, but also over WebXR in general, and anything you need to know to get started with this webinar. Our goal is to share you some productivity tips, independent of which framework you're using, that you can apply with your WebAR development teams. In our case, we're going to do that by example with a Wonderland Engine-based image tracking AR app that we're going to combine with MindAR.js open source image tracking for the tracking. Okay, but first, what is WebXR? WebXR just refers to web-based XR. That means virtual augmented reality that runs inside the browser. That might be on your desktop or on your smartphone like today, or it might be on a VR headset like the Quest 3 or any other headset. And that's really one of the biggest powers. So the four main advantages of WebXR are that it's accessible through a QR code or click of a link, that it's an open platform, so you don't have to go through third-party app stores. It's shareable. You can just literally print a QR code somewhere, send someone a link, and it's cross-platform. It doesn't just work on every VR device, basically. Most AR headsets and PC and mobile, just everywhere throughout the board, the big common denominator. Wonderland Engine is a development platform to build apps that run with WebXR. It's made for the web, which means that it integrates super well with JavaScript and TypeScript, but we also optimize it for the specific performance characteristics of the web. The workflow really adheres to the web mindset. So you make a change, automatically reloads in the browser, and you have just sub 1 second packaging time, so you can just immediately see what you're building. And finally, optimization is one of our kind of core strengths. We just want to take that off of your shoulders. We optimize the engine in WebAssembly and WebGL too, so we can render tens of thousands of objects in rich VR environments. And we do all sorts of asset compression for you to keep your download size small and your download times fast. So if you look at where Wonderland Engine positions itself in the vast landscape of frameworks, you have code-only frameworks like Three.js, WebinAR.js, A-Frame, cloud-based engines, so editors that run inside the browser, and then development platforms that you download and install, and then produce WebAssembly, JavaScript, HTML files for you. And that is where Wonderland Engine goes in, and where Unity's HTML5 export goes in as well. Finally, to kind of put this into perspective on what we focus on most when building Wonderland Engine, the following slide contains a totally not biased choice of two axes, where Wonderland Engine, of course, is on the top right, because we focus extremely on optimization and workflow. So obviously, this is biased by the choice of axes. But with code-only frameworks, you usually have a little bit of a difficult workflow because you position objects by code. If you have an editor, in general, you have an amazing workflow. So like Canvas and Unity are great choices. But when it comes to optimization specifically for the web, we are putting a lot of effort into Wonderland Engine. And that's why we position ourselves like this. Just to show you a bit of what is possible with Wonderland Engine, here are some apps that have been released in the last couple of weeks. This particular image you see here is a vintage study room by Ayush Manori. You can find that on Twitter. Dead Secret Circle Web was our effort to bring a native MetaQuest store game into the browser on the MetaQuest VR headset. And we did that by rebuilding the project with the original assets. And you can play that either on HeyVR or on dead-secret.wonderland.dev. We recently even added mobile support, so you can just play it on your smartphone. You can also play it on a computer. The Escape Artist is a WebXR exclusive title. It's also featured on the MetaQuest new tab page. And Wonderbricks is a title that even supports mixed reality. You can see it there in a living room. All right, but today we're not doing VR, we're doing AR, and specifically we're going to use open source image tracking to build the WebAR app. Why MindAR.js? Why an open source image tracking? That's just because it's slightly faster to set up because we don't need an app token for eighth-wall or something like that. All of what we showed today is possible with eighth-wall as well. It just requires a little bit more for the automatic deployments. And so we're resorting to open source image tracking today to focus on the productivity parts. So what you've seen is the introduction. We're now at the agenda. And what is next is the hands-on WebAR app development. What you will need is Wonderland Engine, a code editor of choice, and Git, and also a GitLab.com account that is verified to run the GitLab CI pipelines. The hands-on is basically going to be 5 steps. We're going to start by creating a custom template. We're going to import a 3D model and optimize it. Then we're going to create a code repository to then set up automatic deployment to GitLab Pages, so a free static web hosting solution. And finally, we're going to do just a little introduction to scripting. Okay, so that means we're getting into the hands-on part. We have the Sketchfab model that we're going to be using today. It's fairly heavy. It has like 500,000 polygons almost, which you would usually consider as a little bit much for like a WebAR experience. Well, we'll get to that later. We have GitLab open for creating a new project in a minute. We have the continuous integration documentation from Wonderland Engine. And we're going to use this as a reference to copy and paste the config from. And finally, we have the Wonderland MindAR tracking repository here. You'll recognize it from the tracker and the examples. And that is what we're going to be starting from. Before we even open Wonderland Engine, I want to start creating a custom template. Just in case you never started Wonderland Engine, make sure to sign in once here in the editor. So it looks roughly like this. And you start it, have a new project here, but then you can just close it again. This is just so that it creates some basic folders that we need in the next step. I want to have all the files of this repository on my local computer. I'm going to do that by cloning it. You can alternatively just download it here as a zip file and extract it. I'll leave that up to you. I'm just going to copy the link here, go to the folder I prepared for this webinar, right-click, and open a shell so that I can run Git from my command line. I'm just gonna type git clone and paste the link. That's gonna clone all the files onto my computer. Here you go. And this is the Wonderland MindAR tracking repository. It comes with examples, and we're gonna use the image tracking folder. So if you wanna find it through Google, just type in Wonderland MindAR tracking. I think Wonderland MindAR should probably be enough. Yeah, so you'll find it directly. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we have the examples here. So just to repeat this, in the folder that we just downloaded and unzipped or that we cloned, we have the examples. And we're going to convert the image tracking into a custom template. Wonderland Engine stores templates in %appdata%, and then /Wonderland Engine. If you hit enter, you should see a .session, logs, and maybe a templates folder. If the templates folder doesn't exist, just create it. In case you're on Mac, this folder will be located in your home directory, in library, and then application support. So home directory, library, application support, and then Wonderland Engine. And then again, you will have the logs folder, .session, recent projects, all of that. If you're on Linux, it's in home folder, .Wonderland Engine. All right, so create the templates folder, and into the templates folder, you can just copy the entire image tracking folder. And then in addition to this file, I'm going to open the image tracking folder in the templates. And I'm gonna go to the root of the MindAR tracking repository. I'm also going to copy the prettier RC because the pretty RC is just useful to have for automatic formatting. Finally, I'm going to delete the package lock because the package lock defines specific versions of libraries. But when creating a new project, I would just like to have the latest version of each package available. And that means we just created a custom template. We're done. Next step is creating a project. So let's use the custom template by opening Wonderland Engine, creating a new project, calling it WebinAR. And I'm just going to create this using our own custom template that should show up here, like this magic wand symbol. And it's called image tracking, just like the file here, image tracking in our custom template folder. So using that, I can hit create, and now NPM is going to install all the packages and dependencies that we need for this project. The first time this runs might take a little while, especially if you're streaming, but on especially macOS and Linux, it should already be done. Here we go. Now we can click the green arrow at the top, and that will launch the browser for us. And you can already see it's running. It's running even on desktop. Hi, now you can see me twice. But we can actually go ahead and bring up the tracking target on our phone. And we can see that it is already tracking, even despite some reflections. So here you go. Open source image tracking is actually kind of good. But obviously, this is reverse, right? We would like to actually have it tracking on our phone and maybe use the tracker on our computer. So let's just go ahead and fix that. To debug a web page on your Android phone, you will need to enable the USB debugging. You can do that in your settings, then go to developer options at the bottom. If you do not have developer options, then you go to About Phone, and you will here click on the software information, click the build number until developer mode is turned on. There we go. Now, if you go to settings, you will have the developer options at the bottom. If you have those, you then enable those on, then search for USB, and that will show you USB debugging. Once you have the USB debugging enabled, you can connect your computer with your phone with a USB-C cable, and a authentication pop-up is going to ask you to connect your device. If that authentication pop-up doesn't happen immediately, it might in the next step. So you see Wonderland Editor here. At the top, we have local device. We can select that. So I can select the Android device and just hit play. And that launches the tab on my phone, on the Chrome tab, and you can see it's already recording. And for this case, I have prepared the Chrome Inspect Devices, which allows you to inspect tabs on your computer. So there you can see basically the screen of my phone running. Now we'll just go into static target 0 to bring up the image tracking target. And now let me switch back here. You can see the image tracking is already working. And there we go. We have successfully set up an image tracking project. And the nice thing is, next time you do this, it's going to take you exactly 10 seconds using the template and just creating a new project. With that set up, the next step is going to be pushing this into a Git repository. To do this, we first have to create the repository on GitLab. In this case, I will create a just blank project. I'm going to call this WebinAR. I use my own namespace here, and then make sure I uncheck initialize repository with a README because I don't need this, and finally create project. All right, and GitLab already suggests a bunch of different amounts of commands that we could be doing here. Important is this first step to actually configure your Git. So if you haven't done this yet, I have already for this computer, then you can just run these commands. Finally, we don't want to create a new repository because we already have existing files. We're going to take this step, push an existing folder. And to push an existing folder, we're just going to run these commands here inside the Wonderland Engine project folder. The easiest way to get there is to go to the project root, right-click, and show in folder, and select your project. In this case, make sure that I'm using the right, not the test. And there we go. So this is the folder for our Git repository. I'm going to make this step a little bit more visual. I'm going to briefly do the first steps as announced per command line, and then get GitLab next to this. The first command sets up Git repository in this folder. Initialize the Git repository, wonderful. Then we add a remote such that Git knows where to upload any files. And then the next step would be adding all files to the next commit, or staging all files. We're going to do this through Visual Studio instead, because Visual Studio has a pretty nice integration for for Git. So I'm going to open Visual Studio Code and then select Open Folder to open the WebinAR folder. You need to select Trust the Authors. Since you were the author, happily trust that. And then already asks you that it would like to add some files to the git ignore. Absolutely, that is a great suggestion. That creates the git ignore folder for us. And for Wonderland Engine, we will add a few more folders here. That is one's the deploy folder, and then the editor folder we don't need either. And this will give us a great base to create our project. So let's save that and then move over to the source control tab that you hopefully can see. It's a little bit small, but on the left, the third icon from the top. This shows all the changes in our current directory. For some reason, the deploy is still here. The Wonderland runtime.js and such are all in the deploy folder. There we go. Okay. So apparently, Visual Studio needed an update here, where if you stage the git ignore file, it will update and hide all the files that we have just ignored. This works. Let's also commit basically every other file that you see here, except these few from the cache. I'm actually going to go ahead and add cache.js to the ignored files as well. Okay, so I'm gonna just continue staging the prettier RC, and yeah, so now it updated the git ignore file here. I'll restage that, stage the package log, the package JSON, the WebinAR AR, this one texture file from the cache, the index.js, the two tracking images, and the targets mind.mind, which is MindAR.js's kind of feature file for the image tracking. Finally, I need to enter a commit message, and the commit message is going to be initial commit. If I commit here, I can then click on publish branch, and this will upload all the files and all the changes that I made locally to the server. If we reload the GitLab repository, we'll see all the files have now showed up here. Okay, so we have source control set up. Now we can make changes, we can add little commits and push them. This is great also when working on two features at the same time. Two developers can just work on separate kind of branches, and those can be merged later. Next step that we want to do is we want to publish this onto GitLab Pages. And we're going to do that by automatically just publishing every change that we commit and push to the repository. To do that, we need a configuration file for GitLab. And we can find an example for that configuration file on the wonderlandengine.com/editor/CI/CD documentation page that we have on the website. You can also just Google for Wonderland Engine continuous integration, and you'll find it too. And the configuration we want here, the GitHub Workflows configuration is here too, just in case you need it ever. But our configuration is the .gitlab CI YAML file here. And it asks you to create this file. So let's go ahead and do that as well. I'm going to switch back to the Explorer view, then add file, new file here, paste the name .gitlab-ci.yaml, and then I have an empty GitLab configuration file. And Visual Studio Code actually recognizes this as a GitLab file. So let's go ahead and just copy the configuration here and then paste it into the configuration file. Now, obviously, in the documentation, we can't know what your project is going to be called. So we need to adapt the project name here as the WLP file. In this case, my WLP file is called WebinAR.wlp. So let's WebinAR.wlp. Let's have that adapted. If I now save our GitLab config file that runs Wonderland editor to package the project and then gzips the content to upload it to GitLab Pages is complete. We just need to push it to the repository. We can do that by going to the source control. I'm just going to call git add.gitlab CI YAML. That stages the file. That is basically what we did before entering the commit message. Now I'm going to run git commit -m for message CI initial config. So now we created a commit, a change that adds the config with the file that we staged before. And then finally, we're going to git push origin main. And that should push this one little file up to our repository. And this pushes the file to the repository. If we reload, we can see there is a GitLab pipeline running here. So we have this like little circle. If we click on that, we can see that there's two stages, the build stage and the deploy stage. And the pages job is in the deploy stage and the package job is in the build stage. And we see it failed. It failed for a very simple reason. And that is that Wonderland Editor wants us to log in or provide a token. And we're going to provide that token in the next step. We had our pipeline set up and it failed. So we want to provide a token to make it not fail. To provide the token, we're going to create a CI variable. And a CI variable can be created in settings, CI/CD, and then underneath variables, we can expand the variable section and add a variable. The variable that Wonderland Editor expects is called WLE_credentials. And for the value, we're going to create a token. For that, just go to wonderlandengine.com, sign in, and underneath you see the API tokens section. And if you scroll down, you have a field where you can create a new API token. I am going to call this WebinAR CI, and I'm going to set the expiration date to something a little bit later, for example, roughly 1 year from now. And then when I create the API token, it's going to download the token as a JSON file, but it's also going to create that entry at the very top, which has a convenient copy token button. So we're just going to scroll up and click copy token, and I'll paste that back in our variable config. Don't worry, I'm going to delete this token again later, so you're not going to use it. So now we have WLE credentials, and that allows us to just go back to the pipelines. And I have a convenient pipelines at the top here that you will probably not have. You can get that by going to build and then pipelines and then hitting this little pin icon. And if you hit the pin icon, that adds it to your most used items at the top, which is super nice and makes things so much faster. So now you can go to pipelines and you can click on the failed job, click on the package, and then just rerun this job with the retry button at the top right. And there we go. By the way, what's happening in the background here is that we provide a Docker image, which is basically a small virtual machine that comes with Wonderland Editor pre-installed. So the CI will download that Docker image, so you can save yourself the installation of Wonderland Editor. And then it just runs the Wonderland Editor command here on our project to package in a windowless, so without the UI, package the project. And then it just runs through, packages everything, and then finally, packaging successful, great. So we got it actually to work. We can return to the pipeline here and through pipelines or through the pipeline link that I just clicked. So pipelines here will be here, clicking on running. And then we can see that the deploy job, the pages job, is running as well now. And in just a moment, it's going to create a secret second job. Here you see pages deploy that is internal from GitLab that just moved everything to GitLab Pages. We now want to see that page, right? It's live. The link is in deploy and then pages. And there you have your link. And this link has the live Wonderland Engine project running. Okay. Again, allow my camera to work here. You will not be able to access this link because by default, GitLab Pages are private. Let's change that real quick. So we go to settings, and then in general, we have the visibility controls in visibility, project features, and permissions. We expand that, and then just scroll down until you find pages, and then switch only project members to everyone. And now your page is public once you hit save changes. Next, let's make this app actually a little bit more interesting. So we went through the repository setup, custom template setup, and we have an automatic deployment ready. So every change that we make from now on is just going to update the live version. How cool is that? That saves us so much time, especially when working with stakeholders like our project manager or the client or anyone really. We can just paste them a link within seconds after making the change. And you will see when you go to pipelines, like publishing and automatically deploying, packaging and automatically deploying this takes 53 seconds to a minute. This is just incredibly fun to work with. And if a project manager or client says like, hey, here's a bug, you can literally go ahead, fix the bug in 15, 20 minutes, and then send them a link just after that, after you committed, which is part of your development flow, hopefully anyway. And yeah, you have a preview, and you can even, if you go to deploy and pages, you can even set up custom domains here. So you can just have wonderlandengine.com redirect to a GitLab Pages link if you wanted. And that would allow you to host your WebAR app for free. Next step is downloading this model from Sketchfab, and we're gonna integrate that and then optimize it. I'm going to download the 3D model here, and I'm going to actually choose the 8K version. I had a quick hesitancy here because the 8K version takes a little bit longer time to compress, and that makes it not as ideal for this webinar, but I do want to show you how cool it is that you can have an 8K texture inside a mobile phone, which often is restricted by various like WebGL implementations. So just gonna go ahead, download that, open, and I have the lobster with fries here. Now let's go ahead and open in Wonderland Engine the root directory. I'm just gonna create a new folder here called models. Now I'm gonna move the lobster with fries down here into the models, and then from here, I can drag and drop it into the C. Now, if you drag and drop it here, it's not actually going to follow the image track, but instead you need to retarget it to the tracking target, because the tracking target is what gets moved by the image tracking algorithms. So I'm just going to drag and drop it onto the tracking target here. Now you don't see it in the scene, that's because it's mainly covered by these objects. I'm just gonna select those with my right mouse button and hitting shift to multiple select, and then hit delete. And now I can see the model down here. It's completely white, which if you remember from Sketchfab does not at all resemble what it should look like. That's because the textures are currently being compressed. This texture compression for an 8K texture can take a while, but it only takes this long for the first time that you ever do it, and then it's going to be cached. And it's also really important in a minute that we commit these files to Git such that the GitLab CI, the auto deployment, doesn't get slowed down by having to recompress these textures. One thing that we can already do here, though, is we can scale up the model, and I'm going to do that by selecting the Sketchfab model on the left, then hitting S for scale, and then using the white dot in the middle to uniformly scale up the model roughly to what size of the objects were before. And now I can save this and basically wait for the textures to finish compressing. In the meantime, though, I'm going to show you how you could optimize this model with Wonderland Engine really easily. So if you go to Views and Resources, you will see all the meshes, all images, all textures, and other resources that Wonderland Engine is currently managing for you. And you can go ahead and scroll down to find the meshes down here that we just imported. And you'll see, because this is a 3D scan, we have like kind of like odd looking meshes here. But what we want to do is we want to simplify these meshes to have only roughly half the vertices so that they just download faster. And the thing is, we won't be able to see a difference anyway. It's going to be a little bit hard to tell from just like this super white model. So we would need to wait for the texture compression. So just trust me that it looks pretty similar. I'm just going to go ahead and hit simplify on all of these, and that will allow them to scale down to roughly 50% of the vertices without really much change being noticeable. So you can actually see there's maybe some holes that get created because it's a 3D scan. We're going to leave this for now as such, but as you can see, there's an easy way to basically reduce and decimate your objects in case your artists gave you a model that's just a little bit too high res, so you can still use it before they went in and manually optimized it in case the result of the automatic algorithms isn't good enough. Finally, in images, you will see all the images that were imported. And in this case, we see our 8K texture in here. And we could just scale it down to 4K if we wanted to, here in Wonderland Engine super easily, just in case, again, maybe you got a 3D model that was intended for the far distance of your app, and you really just need a 512 by 512 texture on it. But your artist gave you a 4K texture, and just scale it down super easily, no complaints necessary. Okay, so this we can launch onto our Android device. So now the Android device is authenticated and connected. I can hit play. Make sure to bring up the image target here. There we go. And then if we have the tracker, then we see, aha, it's working fine. But really, if this were like a restaurant menu or something like that, we would want it kind of flat against the screen. So let's just quickly make that change here. Just gonna select the Sketchfab model, hit R for rotate, and then rotate 90 degrees. I'm holding Control to snap rotate in 30-degree increments. We can rotate by 90 degrees like this around the x-axis. If I save this and package this, and there we go. Here we go. By the way, just as a practical advice, if you do image tracking, make sure that the 3D model is always bigger than the kind of tracked image target, because people will try to move close to it. And if they move too close, like in this case, then they'll lose track of the object. So ideally, just make it extra big so that people can go comfortably close, but the target is still small in comparison. You can experiment with this easily by yourself. Okay, so obviously we want to push this change so that it's online and on our pages deployment. So let's go ahead and refresh the source control. We see all the changes, great. So we have the cache here, and we want to commit all of this cache. That is because it contains the results of the image compression, and the CI virtual machines that GitLab gives us for free aren't really that fast. So we wouldn't want to do this image compression on the server. We want to just commit the cache. Finally, the model is necessary, the lobster with fries, and the changes to the project. By the way, you can see, hey, we deleted the cube, we deleted the cone. You can actually read Wonderland Engine project files. It's designed to be able to git diff this and be able to see, okay, we added the Sketchfab model and so on. And we're just going to commit this, and now we're going to call our change add lobster with fries, and then commit this. And then going to GitLab, we will see in pipelines. So now the pipeline should be triggered. There we go, it's already running. And it's again packaging in 1 minute. The lobster with fries is going to be online on our app. I am going to make one more nice change here. And that is, I want people to be able to click on this model and then open a website, because maybe they want to order the lobster with fries. I don't know. If we select the Sketchfab model on the left, we can add component and collision. And this collision is basically the area, the volume that can be clicked. And I'm holding the middle mouse wheel. You can emulate that on Mac by pressing Alt and I think right or left mouse button. I don't know, you'll figure out. And you can orbit around the model, and we can see, okay, it roughly fits. Good enough. Then we add another component, and that is a cursor target. And the cursor target tells our kind of clicking system that you will be able to click on this. Finally, we need a cursor, and we are going to add the cursor to the AR camera in here to add a component that is a cursor. And then finally, we need a custom component to handle the clicking. The custom component is super easy. So we're just going to right-click New JavaScript Component in our JavaScript folder. And we'll call it Open Link and click Create. Now we can add this component to our Sketchfab model. It's going to be probably in the very bottom, Open Link. It is not. That is because this project has a small oddity where the index.js is added for some reason. Please remove this from Views, Project Settings, and then in Scripts, you have the JavaScript folder and JavaScript/index.js. Please remove the index.js. There we go. And now if we go to Properties, we can add component open link. And we have our default component here. If I open this, I can either just double click, it'll open Visual Studio for me, or open it in Visual Studio. I can remove, first of all, everything that we don't need. And that is going to be the init, the onRegister, and the update. All the other stuff we're going to keep for now. I'm going to save this, and I want to show you something cool. That's why I'm just going to split my screen here and have Wonderland Engine running on the right. And if I make a change here to the param, which I'm just going to call URL for now, and then change the type to string, and I'm going to make the default https://wonderlandengine.com. If I hit save now, it will immediately update in the editor. The URL is now shown in our configuration, so we can change this to whatever we want. Finally, we're just going to make sure the URL is actually opened, and that is a matter of adding the click handler to our cursor target. So we get the cursor target with target equals this object get component, and then cursor target. And then we have a onClick property on the target. We add a new callback. And in this case, I'm just going to use an arrow notation function. And whatever we write here is going to happen when you click on this. So I'm going to do window location href equals this.url. So the public property, the URL up here, can be accessed with this.url. And so this just opens the link for us. If I hit save and package this, then I can try this out locally. Then we need the tracking image. There we go. Now it's really reflective. So there we go. Now we can click on it, and now it switches to Wonderland Engine. So it works. We just need to commit the change to make it available to everyone. And that is a matter of going to source control again, hitting plus to stage all the files, add link on click. There we go. Save that, close it. Now it allows me to sync changes. I'm not going to pull the changes this time because I know no one else made a change. And we are done. See, the pipeline for the lobster succeeded. So in case you clicked on the link in the meantime, and there you go. I'm just going to prepare the GitLab link here. And then the pipelines. Just going to quickly supervise the package. And that pretty much concludes this webinar. So we have this on GitLab Pages right now. Lighting changed, unfortunately, a bit. There we go. If we click on it, we switch websites. All right, cool. Let's quickly summarize what we've learned. Custom templates allow you to super quickly kickstart your projects, set them up. It's worth it because if you build a lot of projects, you save on every project. Auto deployment allows you to rapidly iterate with stakeholders like your clients or your project managers. Finally, if you use a visual editor, like Wonderland Editor, for example, even your creative team can take part in setting up your scene, and you can place objects much faster, obviously. Finally, there is a lot of productivity plugins for your code editors, so make sure to install those, for example, for automatic code formatting or for kind of like code completion and snippets and such. I didn't show this time, but there is, especially for Wonderland Engine, there is a snippets plugin that you can install in Visual Studio to basically take care of like various patterns that repeat. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day.